a small presentation on big data, AI, and ML in the construction industry. So that's what I've tried to put together, something which I have personally worked on and my understanding of the industry and how it works. So I'll take you guys through what is my understanding. And before we get into the big concepts of big data, AI, and ML, I would like to give a brief on the basics of the concept behind this. So we will start with understanding what is data in the first place. Then we will see what is information, how does data transform into information. Then what is information system, which is needed to manage all this before that we spoke of. And then how is information managed? Now, that's one thing of creating the information. The other thing is how do you manage that information? And To manage this information, you need to have a system in place which is called an MIS. I don't know how many of you have heard of it before, but this is a very integral part of any business organization. They have an active management information system, and we will look at the different types of MIS just to get an understanding. Then we will see why it is important for a business, what is the root cause of having an MIS in place, and how it helps the business, how it can be implemented in an organization. I will not touch upon this much because a lot of businesses have different ways of doing it, but I'll give a gist of how architectural practice and construction or project management plays a role here. Then we will get into the core concepts of understanding big data, AI, ML, and cloud computing from the aspect of the previous definitions which that we'll look at. And of course, BIM being the most prominent of the processes which applies these concepts. We will look at that in brief, and we will also look at some of the projects that I previously delivered or I'm still delivering on how these concepts have been applied using BIM into these organizations. So first, let's understand what is data. It is an assimilation of raw facts. That means you have just the fact written there without any context, just as numbers and text. So what we understand by this is, say for instance, I'm looking at a construction project and I am tagging all the doors and windows in my project. So when I'm writing a door or door of say 900 by 2100 size, that's a raw fact which is not having any context, and it is written as plain text and number. So this is data. Am I clear when I'm saying what data is? It's just pure number without any context or adjacency assigned to it. Now let's understand what is information. When data is presented with context, that means when I'm saying that there's a door, I am telling which wall the door is placed on and what is the kind of fire rating that the door needs to have. Then I am giving it some context. I am telling what the door needs to do and what its behavior supposed to be. Or if I am presenting the data which is processed, if I am saying that the project has 50 doors of a certain type, then I'm giving a processed data out. When I'm doing one of these two, that's when data transforms into information. I hope I'm clear with the concept of when data becomes information. Data becomes information when it is either organized, analyzed, and summarized, and it needs to help in decision making. That's the key aspect there, that's the key takeaway there. Information needs to be something which helps you in making decisions. Okay. Until then, it is still remaining as data. Now, what are the different types of informations? We are from the architectural background. We are looking into a lot of design aspects. So we need to understand content from different aspects. One is whether it's content assessment and funnel analysis. That is something which brings people into your design for discussion. When do you discuss what? That is content calendar. When do you discuss your content with which party? So after doing it for a certain extent, you discuss it with a structural engineer or a MEP engineer. Then it is content integration game. So these are different ways of managing your content with different parties involved in the project. Then you also have design and production services. So these are specifically creative services where you get into a creation of something new which is not already there. In order to do creative services, there needs to be a lot of research. So you need to do a lot of topic and audience research, primary research. So something which you do before your start of design. For instance, you do case studies, you understand how design is presented, what are the factors influencing design. So all this goes into your research services. Then you also have content creation. Once you're done with your work, how do you produce it? The different drawings that you produce, the different presentations that you produce, the different slide shares that you produce. And once all of this is done, you need to maintain a version control for it, right? So you are doing something, you do a slight change after the client tells something, or if you're doing a change or variation, once an engineer has given you input, then you need to do version controlling, version 1, version 2, revision 1, revision 2. So all this together forms information. It is not an isolated or uh, distant entity. Information is created throughout the process of the project, used at these different stages, and you need to know how to control and manage it. That is when information system comes into place, because you need to know how to place information in your database, right? So an integrated set of components for collecting, that is how you collect the information or data, how you store the data, how you process the data, and how you provide it back to the query. So if I am someone who's searching for an email from one of the MEP consultants on what was the feedback for AC units, then that is retrieving of data to process as information, right? So I need to store my data in such a way that I am able to retrieve it, or the different users of the project are able to retrieve it. That's when it becomes an information system. So one of the information systems that you can think of is an email client, right? Gmail works in a particular manner, Hotmail works in a particular manner, Rediff works in a particular manner. So although they have a background which might be similar, but their interfaces are different, how you raise queries in them might be different. Similarly, Outlook works completely differently. If anybody here has used Outlook, you would know, even though it's an email client server, it's working differently when compared to Gmail. So that is how information systems are created. Now, what all is involved in an information system and how it is managed? The first thing that you need to have is applications. The 3 or 4 applications that I spoke of just now are the different applications that you need to manage an information system. The second thing you need is information itself, right? You need to process information through those applications. Then you need the infrastructure to hold it. So for us to have this presentation that we're having right now, I need MSP, I need PowerPoint, you need to have Zoom application with you. So all these are different infrastructure needs that you need to have so that you are able to do this in the first place. Then you need the different people to run these shows, right? You need the different people to run these different softwares. Like somebody might be good at PowerPoint, somebody might be good at AutoCAD, somebody might be good at Photoshop. So you need to know the different people who are good at different skill sets and assign them those roles. Then you need the processes. What do we mean by processes is, for instance, when you start with a sketch, conceptual sketch, you will name it in a particular manner. Then once you have your client approval or your, for instance, in this case, when you start with your design, AD work, you will have conceptual sketches, schematic sketches first. You will have an approval from your teachers. Then you will get into single line drawings. Then you will get into detailed drawings. Then you will get into sections and elevations. So there is a process in place which you will follow in order to ensure that all the information needed for the project gets captured. Similarly, for each and every type of activity, you would have a process which needs to be put in place so that you are following it. I hope I'm clear with the different needs of an information system or IT system. Now we have understood what is information system. Now what is management information system? Let us look at the key definitions which are used in the industry. An MIS is a system which is an information system used for decision making. That's the primary purpose, one of the most common definitions that you will find for MIS. The other definition that we have is an information system used for coordinating, controlling, analysis, and visualization of information. So in this case, you might not necessarily be making the decision, but you might be doing all that is needed for the people to make the decisions. Okay, so you might be assimilating the data, you might be making information out of it, you might be making presentations out of it, and you might be giving it back to the person who raised the query. So the person looks at the 2 or 3 different types of graphs and studies and takes a decision on one of the aspects. The other way is an information system is to study people, technology, and organizations. So this is more day-to-day activity where you're not making active decisions, but you're gathering all the data that is needed to finally make decisions at a broader level or at a business level. Why is MIS important for business? Let's understand this from each level of the management. So when you look at any business, you would typically have 3 to 4 levels of management or administration in place. The first level would be the basic level where most of the people who work on particular tasks or activities are placed. Then you have the middle level management or the junior level management. Junior level management basically oversees the work that is being done by the staff assigned on the tasks. Mid-level management takes care of the groups of junior level managers, and they help the business with the critical information needed for the top leadership to take decisions. The top level management is primarily into goal setting and giving direction to the business. They don't involve in day-to-day activities, but they give the entire business a direction. For instance, Mr. Ambani wouldn't be getting down to the level of understanding, how many Jio subscribers were taken today, or how many Jio subscribers left the network, or how much of steel did we procure, or how much of oil did we procure. He will not look at that on a day-to-day basis. What he will look at is what is the projected business revenue this year, how much do we want to take it to next year. To do that, what are the different kinds of businesses we want to invest in. So that is top level management. They are only looking at cash flows and understanding the direction the business has to take. For those kind of people, MIS is going to provide the strategic planning. The data or information that is processed out of the MIS system for these kind of people is to generate business plans. So they will decide based on the available information which kind of business they should invest in, how much they can make out of that business. Okay. For mid-level management or the short-term planning, target setting, controlling whatever goal has been set by the top level management. For instance, if the top level management says we need to deliver 5 lakh square feet of project this year. Okay. For mid-level management, it is going to become like there will be five or six different primary teams. So each team will be assigned 1 lakh square feet target. So it becomes the mid-level manager's responsibility to look at projects where they can deliver and reach that 1 lakh square feet target that has been assigned to them by the top level management. So they are going to look at short-term goals, wherein for them to reach 1 lakh square feet in 1 year, they might have to do 500,000 square feet in the next 6 months or 7 months. That is how they will start targeting and working on their goals. MIS for these kind of people will help in doing planning and controlling. Okay. Most of the people who use Microsoft projects, Primavera, are coming at this level. Right? They are at the middle level management. Then you have junior level management, which we spoke of. These are the people who handle day-to-day operational data. So when the middle level management sets a goal of doing 500,000 square feet in the next 6 months, the junior level management is going to track on a daily basis how much has been completed today and how far are we from that goal. Right? So these people will need on a day-to-day basis operational level decision making. So if I have a team of 5 people, out of that only 4 of them are able to deliver the drawings on time. The fifth person is not able to deliver drawings on time. I start measuring that on a day-to-day basis. Probably at the end of month or 2 months, I tell them you're not up to the mark. You have to either become better or you leave. Right. So that kind of tracking happens at junior level management. I hope I'm clear with the different levels of MIS. Now I look at the core reason why MIS is implemented in a business in the first place. It is to increase the value and profits of a business. Right? That's the reason why a business is set up. Now, I wouldn't set up an architectural practice and say, it's okay if the client doesn't pay me, it's okay if I'm not doing any more extra projects. Right? I wouldn't do that, isn't it? I would want to run a project which delivers. I would want to deliver projects which makes profits for me. So the core purpose of MIS is to deliver value and profit for the business. There are two core types of MIS that we can look at based on how it is applicable for functions. When we talk of functions, it means whether it is helping the marketing team, whether it's helping the production or the manufacturing team, whether it's helping the accounting, finance, or HR team. Right? This is based on function. Which part of your business do you want the MIS for? Or which department of your business do you want the MIS for? The other type is where you do it by administrative level, and something which we looked at just now. So executive support system, this is ESS. This is the one which is used by top level management. It helps in taking key decisions for business strategies. Then you have decision support systems, DSS, which is used by mid-level management primarily to handle short-term goals. And then you have transaction processing systems or automated decision systems. So TPS or ADSS, these are used by the junior level to handle day-to-day activity. So I am handling construction at a site. Now I need a certain amount of steel to run the construction work at site. Once the steel is getting over and I have only 1 or 2 days of stock left, the transaction processing system sees that the steel is getting over and it automatically places order for the next batch. So these are automated systems which are put in place in large construction projects or any business for that matter to avoid conflicts or delays. I hope I'm clear with this different types of MIS. Then let us understand how MIS works. Okay, I'll try to give a graphical example and hope you people understand how MIS functions overall. So this is you or anybody for that matter who is using the system. Okay, you will use a software. As of now, I'm showing MS Projects here, but you can be using AutoCAD, you can be using Revit, you can be using any software, and you will be feeding in some data into that software. The software is going to talk to a database through API. Now, what is API? Does anybody know what is API? It's called Application Programming Interface. So basically, you are talking to an application through database. You are providing raw data to the database and you are taking the processed information from the database back to the software. And this is how it's going to be the overall process of MIS. So I hope it's clear till here on how MIS works in terms of this just to show in graphical terms. We do it on a day-to-day basis. It's just that we don't know that we are using MIS. Right. So any software application that you use, you are being a party to one of the MIS systems. Let us understand the different measures of computer memory. This is just a precursor to understand, the amount of data that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So all of you must be aware of how much is 1 KB, how much is 1 megabyte, how much is 1 gigabyte, how much is 1 TB. All of you must be using it on a day-to-day basis, right? All these different terms. But have you used 1 petabyte? Do you know how much is 1 exabyte? That's a lot of data that we're talking of here. 1 petabyte is 1000 TB, close to 1024 TB. We are actually working with these amounts of data in the current scenario. In fact, they are also falling short. Right now, the businesses are using much bigger data structures, more than exabyte, something which is very difficult to comprehend, but it's already in existence. It's already being used. Zettabyte is 1024 exabytes, and yottabyte is 1024 zettabytes. How much is that in terms of scale? If you want to comprehend, you see, you will have to keep hard disks like this, stack by stack, stack by stack, a full warehouse. You have to keep 2000 cabinets full of hard disks, TB hard disks, to make a exabyte processing unit. And you would need an entire city to actually manage the data for zettabyte and yottabyte. But this is already being done. The amount of data that we are producing is very close to this. We will look at this in the coming slides. How much data do we human beings create on a daily basis? Let's look at some of the numbers here. We are approximately having 500 million tweets being sent on a daily basis, close to 294 billion emails which are transferred between different parties, 4 petabytes of data being created just by Facebook, on Facebook by users like you and me. 4 petabytes. Right? And 65 billion messages approximately being sent on WhatsApp. This number keeps increasing on a daily basis, but that's the vast amount of data that we're talking of here. Close to 5 billion searches are made on Google, our most favorite answering machine. But look at the number, 5 billion. The population of humanity on Earth right now sits at around 7.4 billion. That means 1 in every 3rd person is searching on Google for something. 463 exabytes of data is created every day. That means a warehouse, 463 warehouses are needed on a daily basis just to save the data that is being created by humanity. That's the vast extent of data that we're talking of. And if we look at just a PMC project, a project management consultancy handling a 1.5 lakh square feet project, that's roughly 2 terabyte of data that is produced just for project management consultancy. I am not talking of the design presentations that an architect would do for this project. It's just the PMC which will be managing different parties and ensuring data is flowing freely. They themselves will produce 2 terabyte of data per project. So it's pretty easy for us to understand, that's a lot of data. That's really big data, right? That's so much data that you might get lost within 2 or 3 projects to find the real file or information that you need out of a project. And that's the reason why big data really came into picture, right? Because of the amount of data that we are producing, we need a system, we need a way to manage the system to be able to access the data and make sense of it. That means make it as information. Now let's understand the key concept of big data. I think this is something that you people would have already seen in your previous presentations. It famously talks about the 3 V's, that is the velocity at which data is created, the volume of data that is created, and the variety of data that is created. But over the last couple of years, this was not enough to categorize something as big data, because a lot of junk was also getting created. A lot of junk data is also created. In order to be able to understand the key differentiator between junk data and usable data, you have 2 other parameters which were added, which is value and veracity. Now, value means the data that is getting stored is required and recommended by somebody. Then it makes sense to dig through that kind of data, because it will give you some sort of return when you're storing it. Then you have veracity. Who's storing this data? also makes a very important classification, right? Who's storing the data also makes it whether the data is reliable or not. Now, the simplest example that we can think of is um, when you have conflict at site, when the project is being managed at site, the architect would have one set of data, the contractor would have one set of data, and the project manager would have one set of data. Now, whose data is correct? Whose data needs to be relied on? That becomes a very important question to answer, right, at the beginning of the project. Who will be the caretaker of the data and whose data will be considered as full and final or accurate data or the data which is available with everybody. So this is getting into finer nuances of how data should be managed, but I hope it gives a gist of why these two parameters of value and veracity became important to get added to the concept or idea of big data. This is another chart which basically explains why having the value and veracity became important. It is not just the different forms of data or velocity or the speed at which the data is getting created. It's also whether the data is useful or not. Like when you look at Facebook, a lot of the data that they are producing is helping them in doing their marketing. A lot of the data which comes to say a contractor throughout the course of the project is helpful for them to assign or assess the trend of costing. For an architect, right from the beginning of till the end of the project, the amount of data that gets generated, you become more and more experienced. So when you see the same type of design alteration being asked by clients, you know that's the trend. You start working towards it to save your own time, save your own efforts. Right. So there is trend in every kind of data. Now, just to understand how the whole big data process works, let's see the different data sources that you have. Your classical Excel sheet is a data source. Then you have DBMS or database management systems. Then you have hard disks. Then you have scripts which run on JSON. So whatever you're doing on AutoCAD and SketchUp and Revit, all of these are also scripts which run and save data. Then you have these different platforms, some produced by Oracle, some by IBM, some by our Autodesk itself. So these are the platforms which process this data and give us information. Right? The different types of information that you need. Based on the purpose, you might be looking at management. Based on purpose, you might be looking at drawing or design alteration. These are the different purposes that you might be extracting that information for. So now let's look at artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence was born out of big data. When we had a lot of data to look at, when we had a lot of data to comprehend, naturally human beings were getting bogged down by the amount of data that they were seeing. So they needed a system in place which could help them think like them. So artificial intelligence is basically a system or a programming which starts responding to the cluster or set of data like human beings would. Right? So for instance, if I am looking at site data, I see the quantity of steel, I see the quantity of steel getting depleted on a day-to-day basis. I automatically take decision like a human being once, say for instance, only 1000 kg or 100 kg of steel is left at site, but I need another 5000 kg for the next 6 days. So as a human being, I would automatically make that judgment that I need another 5000 kgs to be arriving at site, so I will order it. So the same thing artificial intelligence would do. It will look at the set of data which is available and it would do what a human being would do at that point of time. So you're giving it a set of instructions and telling it to respond the way I or you would respond to that situation. So that's the gist of artificial intelligence. Now, when artificial intelligence was being developed, naturally you needed something which could learn, a program which could learn by itself based on the new set of data which is arriving and the past reactions which are being taken by other sources. That is what gave rise to machine learning, right? So machine learning is a part of AI. To be very clear, it is a part of AI. Machine learning leads to successful artificial intelligence. So machine learning is the system where algorithms are run, data is processed, and based on the current set of data, the algorithm learns how to change itself and it becomes better, or it improves the way it is sourcing the data or as processing the data next time. And this process of refinement keeps happening till it becomes very good by itself and naturally keeps evolving with the set of data that is being pushed at it. Only when machine learning can happen at a full-fledged pace and you're able to successfully put in algorithms to do machine learning for the project, AI would become more and more successful. I hope the classification between AI and machine learning is clear here. Let's look at the other aspect of AI and ML. I hope this will give you a much better clarity of what becomes part of what. Deep learning is the prime concept behind machine learning. So in deep learning, you look at vast amount of data and you see how the artificial neural networks. So that's the first level of artificial intelligence, where you respond to situations in a particular manner. You start studying that and you start making analysis based on that. That is what is called deep learning. And when deep learning is applied to algorithms, it becomes machine learning. And when machine learning is able to completely reprogram or improve the programming on its own, then you call it artificial intelligence, because that is exactly what human beings do, right? Over the years, we gain experience, we start dealing with situations differently based on the amount of experience we gain from those kind of situations in the past. So that is exactly what deep learning and machine learning help AI become. So it starts telling, or it starts giving predictions based on the past data more accurately, and then your future predictions become more and more streamlined or accurate. Now we will look at the next concept of cloud computing. So when we looked at till AI and ML, I hope we understood that there's a lot of data that is getting processed. And since the data is getting processed at different locations by different people at different time, you run into the risk of probably not having the single version of truth. And that is where cloud computing becomes more and more helpful and useful for people to use. So all the different people who are working on the same project, they will use data centers which are probably stored away from all the parties, and they would access the single data for all the parties involved in the project. Now you would save your servers on cloud, you would save your virtual desktops like your operating system. Softwares would also be on the cloud. They will be installed on the servers, and your applications and data will also be stored remotely. Now all the users will be accessing the same set of data in the case of cloud computing. And that is where cloud computing becomes more and more efficient. You have single storage space rather than having multiple storage spaces at multiple office locations. You have the same data being read, recorded, and analyzed by the different offices of your organization. And you have a single set of softwares which are used by all the parties. So you don't have different versions of softwares causing problems later, right? So that's how cloud computing became a revolutionary technology, and it started working towards further enhancing the goals of big data and artificial intelligence. So let's understand the two most common cloud computing systems which are available for construction professionals like architects, engineers, and contractors and building designers. So one is from the platform of Autodesk. It's called BIM 360, what you're seeing to your left, and the other one to your right is from Oracle. It's called Aconex. So both of these will be able to provide data for the project right from the beginning of the project, that is from the level of conceptualization to after completion, that is maintaining of the building services, right? What we call as BMS, building maintenance system or building management system. To that level, BIM 360 can hold the documents for you. It is called Common Data Environment in construction terminology, CDE. So what this platform basically does is you will work on this platform. So your Revit files will also be on the cloud, your AutoCAD files will also be on the cloud, your email exchange between different parties will also be on the cloud within this BIM 360 platform or Equinix platform. You will also discuss on the same model together simultaneously. You will also look at the same model with the site personnel. So at any given point of time, it is the same version of work that everybody is referring to. And that is how you reduce clashes, you reduce coordination problems, you reduce conflicts, you save money, you save time, and you save lives. Maybe you are avoiding some risky situations at site by looking at it beforehand between all the consultants transparently. Now we've looked at a lot of data, we've looked at a lot of processes, we have maybe confused that this is all going to lead to chaos. But is there a method to this madness? For this, fortunately, you have building documentation standards and nomenclature standards which are applied by all the parties involved in the construction, especially large construction systems. It is called BS 1192. If anybody is interested, please go ahead and download that document. It talks a lot about how BIM data in particular and construction data is managed across businesses and processes. So in order to save yourself from this chaos of naturally getting lost in all this data, this proposes a file nomenclature system. So every file, every data set that is produced within the construction ecosystem can be bucketed using this file naming system. So you can put this file naming system to the file based on the need and necessity that it is satisfying, and you will be able to readily dig into the heap of data and get the exact information that you're looking for. So let me just briefly explain what each of these elements are. Here it talks of the name of the project. So you see here it is SC1, the project name. Then the next one here talks about the originator or the person or the company which is originating it. Here it is SFT, the name of the company which is originating this file. So based on the different companies which are involved in delivering that project, each one will have this number different. All of them will have the same project code, but they will have this originator code which will be different. So for instance, Atkins is working with say Gensler for services. So all the files that will be produced by Atkins will have ATK as the code here, and all the files which are produced by Gensler will have GSR or GSL as their code here. So that way you can tell which company produced this data, right? Then you have volume or system. So basically which level of work you were doing, or where is this work being delivered. So within a single project you might have different phases or different portions that you have to work on. So this will categorize which portion of the work is getting delivered in this file. Then you have levels and locations. Here you see 01, that means this is for the ground level. Similarly, if you have 13th level, this will say 13. And if you write 00 here, that would mean that this data is independent of levels and it caters to all the levels. So for instance, your sections, your elevations, your 3D models, your rendered views, they will all have 00 as their categorization here. I hope I'm clear on that. Then it talks about the type of project. So M3, this comes from BIM UK standards, where they talk of M1, M2, M3 and M4, different stages of the project, whether it's in conceptual stage, design development, conceptual stage, schematic development, design development, construction documentation, and handover. So these are the 5 different phases in which your project can be. It talks of that which phase of the project is this data being produced for, right? Then you have the role, which basically talks of whether it's the architect who's producing this, it's the project manager who's producing it, it's the PHE consultant, it's the structural engineer, it's the landscape engineer who's producing that information. Their initial will come there: A, L, P, M, fire engineer, F. So you have different role categories which will come there. Then you have the classification, which basically talks about the drawing series number. So classification will be the beginning part of any drawing series number. So here 30 10 30 might mean that this is being done for the building which has code 30, which has 10 floors, and this is the 30th. And the number of the drawing which is getting produced for that particular view will be 001, 002, 003. You will have those different numbers there. Okay, suitability here talks of whether this is you can talk of GFC for coordination, for review, for comments. So there will be these different suitabilities for which you will be sharing that information. You will mention that here. Then you have your revision. This will basically talk of how many times the same information has been produced and which series of production is this. Okay. Until it has been approved, it will follow a different revision series. After it has been approved, it will follow a different revision series. And then the last one would be the file extension. So if it's a PDF file, it will be .pdf. If it's a DWG file, it will be .dwg. So you see this long name for a single file. This is how large projects are managed. They would name each file in this manner, and that is how they'll be able to manage to work with so much amount of data without ever conflicting with each other. Even if the conflict arises, they know whom to go back to next. I hope it's clear. Now let's understand what is the kind of big data that we really have in projects, construction projects. Right? What is the big data that we're really talking of? You have the number of people who are working in the project, the number of leaves that they have taken, the number of people who are falling sick at site, or the number of people who are being absent consistently at head office. So all this is the different amount of HR information that is getting generated for the project. Why it is important? It is to ensure that the project gets delivered on time, right? Or people are getting rewarded suitably. Whoever is working hard needs to get rewarded suitably. So all this data is also getting tracked as part of your project management. Then you have schedules, different schedules, door schedules, window schedules, the changes to those schedules, the sheet schedule, right? All these schedules are also a lot of data which is getting produced. Now we are not talking of a house, right? Big data is not getting implemented at a house level. It is at the project level, which is far bigger. Say for instance 500 unit apartment or 1000 unit apartment, or a railway project. Like there's a lot of parameters that will get involved there. So in a 500 or 1000 unit apartment complex, you will have nothing less than 60,000 doors, right? Considering each house having 6 to 7 doors and common amenities having another 10 to 15 per cluster. So you might be looking at somewhere around 6 to 7,000 doors, right? So that's a lot of data to comprehend and schedule to manage. Then a lot of your QA QC data, quality assurance and quality compliance. A lot of the drawings are being redone to ensure that there is no wrong information in it before it goes to the site. All this also needs to be captured and stored somewhere. Then you have your change orders. Whatever change is happening in the project, somebody has to raise the bill for it, somebody has to pay for it. And when you're looking at large projects, you are bound to have a lot of changes happening down the line. So somebody has to track and keep that data in place. Of course, the next is the modeling. reality modeling, a lot of renders that you will produce, a lot of 3D draft views that you will look at to understand how the building has to actually come up there, make decisions based on it, change it. Financial, the money, cash flow, how much money is coming into the project, how much is getting used, how much is getting spent, how much is getting saved, where I'm spending more, where I need to save, all that data gets captured here, financial data. HSC is your health and safety, right? Health, safety, and environmental needs of a project are also captured because it's what you do as a responsible builder or a contractor, but also as a regulatory requirement. You need to do it as part of large scale project delivery in any city in this world as of now, right? And the number of drawings that you need to manage, weather reports of when the construction can ideally run, when is the best date to run it, RFIs. This is what we call as a request for information. So when a lot of consultants are dealing within the project, they would keep raising queries to each other about what is really happening there, why is it like this, can we change it. So there's a lot of data exchange which happens between the parties involved in a project, also needs to be tagged and looked at, that everybody's query is getting resolved, nobody is getting held back, the project is not getting held back. To do that kind of analysis also you need to capture this data. So just speaking about it, I took close to 6-7 minutes. Imagine when this has to be done for a project which runs into a couple of years, and the scale at which the project needs to happen, the pace at which the project needs to happen, there will be a lot of data getting generated, right? So big data is needed in construction. Perhaps it is something which has come into construction very late. Nonetheless, it is making inroads into mainstream, and people are realizing the importance of doing big data management. Look at the ecosystem of projects. There are so many parties involved. There are so many methods. So EPCM here means engineering, procurement, and construction management. So that's a type of project management. You would have different types of project management, for each of which there will be different systems or network of people involved. So just look at this image and try to understand the number of parties which are involved in a project, where a project manager has to coordinate with so many people. An architect has to talk to the MEP contractor, civil contractor, utilities contractor, steel fabricator. Everybody needs to be taken on board by the designer and the project manager before the project can proceed. Right? Everybody's needs need to be fulfilled. So naturally, a lot of coordination, a lot of data mining needs to happen for you to be able to produce correct or accurate results at the fastest pace possible. Now let's look at implications of big data and AI in post-construction scenario. Whatever we spoke of till now is during the construction or at the start of the construction. Once the project is completed, after that also you have to save so much of the data related to a project, right? You will be saving the presence and occupancy, or vacancy or occupancy level, the temperature, the electricity that is getting consumed by the units individually and overall as a building, the energy requirements of the building, then how many times the main door is getting accessed, wherever you have access control in place. CAFM and IWMS there means computer aided facilities management and integrated workplace management system. So these are the different types of applications which will again consume data from your big data and produce meaningful insights. So you would know where to increase the temperature, where to decrease the temperature of the AC based on the occupancy or vacancy of the units. You would try to regulate temperatures to provide comfortable working environment for people in the building, and BMS that we spoke of. So all this is also data which is getting produced after the building is constructed, right? So if your model is able to connect whatever work you're doing before, is able to connect to all this data successfully after you have delivered, then you are providing a seamless transition. Your data which was used to produce the project can then be used to run the project successfully as well. And that's where BIM becomes very important, and that is the reason why a lot of these data is getting transferred to BIM, because it's easier to assimilate and analyze data on an existing model with the parameters already set to it. Right? A lot of your Revit and EcoSim and Graphisoft, ArchiCAD projects are capable of tracking this data once the project is constructed as well, because the machinery can be got exactly from the industry. Now let's look at implications of AI in construction. One is building material manufacturers can look at how many times the product that they are putting in the market is getting rejected or is coming back. So based on that, they can do their quality improvements. As merchants, how you can improve your procurement cycle. As facility managers, how you can control the buildings and understand the different qualities of materials which are there in your building, and proactively manage your repair and maintenance. For construction companies, they can understand how to use machinery, how to reduce search time for tools and machineries, and it also helps in improving safety for your laborers. If you are able to control and quality control your materials at site, you are also quality controlling or safeguarding your employees or laborers at site from getting hurt accidentally. Right? And for architects and planners, this will help us in generative designs. We will look at a small example of generative design after some time, but that is also something that we can do. We can take in all these parameters and produce design which is more conducive to it or more appropriate to it. BIM, as I spoke of, is one of the most leading elements of getting big data, AI, ML, and cloud computing into it together. So it's a process. It's not a single software. You have a lot of softwares which will be involved in the BIM process, and at each stage, they can help you make it more and more impactful. So the ones which are marked in red here are basically talking of stages which can be completely impacted by AI. So you can involve a lot of artificial intelligence and streamline those parts of the process. Some of the ones which are marked in blue are the ones where you can do a bit of hand holding with the help of AI. The last part is where the least amount of effect can be seen, like framing of walls and demolition. This is where AI might not be of great help, because AI is working based on the data which is available for construction, not on the basis of data available for demolition. Now let's look at big data and AI ML in building design construction using BIM tools. Okay, so the different BIM tools that are already being used by the market. Fusor is a simulation software which helps you do construction simulation. Autodesk Navisworks is also a construction simulation, clash detection, and program management software. Bentley EcoSim is similar to Revit, and Rhino, of course, a lot of you might be knowing of this. Dynamo is coding or programming software which can be used along with Rhino and Revit to be able to deliver generative designs. Grasshopper is a similar one for Rhino. You can do generative design, you can do computational designing using Grasshopper. Graphisoft along with Atlantis as a rendering software comes as a package to deliver BIM work. And FreeCAD is another free open source software. If anybody is interested, can look at that. That's a open source alternative available to Revit and Rhino. Now there's a small video here. One of the projects that we had done in Singapore. This was a multi-purpose project for which we did rendering on Fusor. So I'll just show what construction simulation is being done and why it is important for us to do that. So you see on the bottom right hand side here, this is showing the project construction management. So basically MSP schedule which has been transferred here. And on the left hand side, bottom left hand side, you can see the key resources which have been assigned to those activities with the criticalities of when those project elements need to happen. Here we've particularly taken a snippet of the crane working on the periphery of the site, because you can see that it also shows the adjacency effects on the buildings which are already constructed according to the phasing and the impact on the nearby site elements. This also shows, let it just zoom out a bit, you can see how the core is getting constructed. You will also see at what stage dismantling of the crane needs to happen, because that's also an important aspect. You should be able to take it out of the site once dismantling is done. So you get to see all that programming aspect here. And then you notice this crane which is going out of the site level to be able to do delivery work. And this basically tells us when all we need to have protective barriers here, which stage of the project we will need to have a protective barrier. And this is happening through simulation. So we are able to understand how the project needs to be delivered throughout the course of its production. And this is another example of big data and artificial intelligence being applied. So this is a tool called Dynamo, which I spoke of some time back. This tool it's called a graphical programming interface. It's similar to Grasshopper, which you see. Here we used it to deliver a skyscraper. We added certain parameters to it in order to achieve the required FSI. And we saw how we can alter or transform the shape of the buildings. So here you can see quickly we are adding in certain parameters like the number of levels required for the building, the floor plate, the rotation of each floor plate, and we are setting in parameters to basically generate a model. You see this is the points which is getting generated now, that is giving us the center of the structure. Then we are assigning the project width and length for each floor plate. Here we are able to change the number of levels. So whatever data feeding I am doing here at the initial level, it is automatically doing the workflow and changing the design aspect here. You see, whatever changes we do there at the beginning, we are able to make changes to the building and bring it into Revit environment to start working immediately from there on. So right from the conceptual massing level, I am able to take it to documentation stage. You find this interesting? Yeah, so this is an example of generative design or computational design. Okay. Now let's look at big data and cloud computing in building construction. So first we saw big data and AI. Now let's see big data and cloud computing. So we already spoke of Oracle Econex. We spoke of BIM 360. You also have other applications like SkySite, Procore, FieldWire, BuilderTrend, and Enscape. Enscape is a rendering software specifically used for building renderings and walkthroughs, which happens entirely on the cloud. So no resource on your system gets used except for transferring the data to the server. Everything else happens on the cloud, and it's a real-time rendering engine. Econex and BIM 360 we have already looked at. They are the common data environments, most prominently used common data environments. Procore is specifically built with keeping site activities in mind, FieldWire and Procore for that matter. BuilderTrend does a trend analysis and gives you future prediction for your designs. That also can be done using BuilderTrend. And SkySite is another alternative to Procore. So whenever you people have time, you can look at these applications. These are widely getting used in the industry. Particularly BIM 360 and Econex is already being used by most of the project management firms. Enscape is also something which I am also using right now to do my renders. Now we'll look at a small demo of how data management happens on BIM 360. You can see in this video how a common data environment is created, a single place where all the files are stored, everybody has access to it. So you can see different people in the project can be assigned different responsibilities. So the level of information that they can see and edit can be altered. Here is a building which is being discussed between two consultants. This is on cloud. Remember, this is on cloud. This is not an individual system. An architect's model is being reviewed with the fire safety consultant. Okay, and then in the next example, we will see how uh, at site information is also being reviewed by someone who's having access to the drawings only, not the model but the drawing. And here you can see a construction site to client coordination. So it's the same file which both of them will look at. It's the same discussion which both of when the two people are having a discussion, both of them can do a walk around of the building, but each one will see the same screen of what the other person is saying. So this way you are able to ensure that the communication doesn't lag or there is no confusion in the communication that's happening. This is all happening within the BIM 360 platform. Okay. Now let's look at some of the case studies or some of the projects that I've personally worked on and delivered. So this is the first one, which is a retail design automation project. This was done when I was part of Tesco, and I worked with architect Balaji, so I'm giving the courtesy to him. So this is how traditionally a retail floor plan design happens in your regular scenario, where you put in the border sheet, apply template, you write all these calculation values, how many number of equipments need to be placed in the project. All this is manually written, manually checked on the drawing, counted on the drawing, and written there. This goes through a series of discussion with your sales and marketing team. So they tell you, no, we need more of fresh or green produce, we need less of meat, we need more of dairy. All that changes will keep happening, and you need to keep doing that to and fro between different teams, right? And once that is done, it goes through an approval process where the middle and higher level management agree to what the store is getting built for. And then it approximately takes 32 hours for a single store to get designed for discussion, right? And then the other efforts of manually calculating the BOQ or BOM for a project, that's separate. So this is how the traditional design process for a retail store would have happened at Tesco. So what we did was we created a Dynamo automation. We created a Dynamo script, which you can see on the top there. This was an automation to calculate based on the existing data or the past data and produce a 3D model automatically for the store. So from 2D, you've directly moved to 3D for a store. So what we need is only the exterior wall for the store, and everything else gets produced automatically. So we just produce the outer wall, and we tell this is the parameter within which the store needs to be developed, and based on the coding that we had already done in Dynamo, scripting that we've already done, it creates an automated 3D model. And the power of Revit, most of you must be already knowing that it can give you automatic BOQs and BOMs. So we schedule our quantities also automatically. So it is finishing within 10 minutes. The work which previously was happening for 32 hours and still prone to errors was being completed in a matter of 10 minutes. So you could create more variations. Remember when we spoke of in the beginning, the core purpose of a business or a management information system is to deliver value and profit to the business. So this was in that direction where we were saving time, we were able to create more options, make a better informed decision, and thereby creating more profits and adding value to the design chain system. The other project that I would like to show here is the police clubhouse, which we did at Muscat. So the entire project was a modular design. That means all entities were following a certain dimension or multiples of it. when I was personally involved in this project, the project was already halfway through. That means the entire core or concrete structure was already built, and only assembly at assembly of tiles at site was to be done. There were multiple parties involved in this project, and the core requirement for the client was to ensure that we use the existing BIM model which was developed by the principal architects, that is the Khatib and Alami, to produce the tile requirement list for the project and be able to deliver it on time. So I'll just give a brief on the project details so you will know the scale of the project. It was supposed to be a hotel and a clubhouse together. This is for Hilton, which was done in Muscat. Then the total built up was around 47,800 square meters, which is roughly 52,000 square feet. The building is ground plus mezzanine plus 6 floors plus 2 basements, 360 rooms in total, and the facade treatment was entirely with granite of 2 shades and glass and aluminum shading or sliding devices. Okay, so that was the brief that came to us. When we started, this is how the site was. So the site already had all of this built. The dry walling system or the granite cladding system was to be done. The post structural frame construction was happening at Muscat. Documentation of the site was already in progress at Muscat. Facade framing and modular designing was happening at Bangalore, that was at our office. And asset tagging for extraction of BOQ and BOM was supposed to be done by my office. And the CNC cutting of the granite based on the information that we produce was being done at China. So I needed to share this information with a granite export company in China, right? And we had to do a live feed between Muscat, Dubai, and China. So Dubai had Khatib and Alami head office, which was the principal architect for the project, and all this tiling was to be delivered in Muscat and installed at site. So you can see the complexity of the project, right? There are multiple, not just multiple parties, they're all sitting in different locations, different time zones, and probably having a different understanding of the project from each other. So what we had to do here was, the first thing we did was we used a centralized system on Revit server called Clarity. We put up the entire database there or Revit project, and then we started creating asset tagging mechanism. So we had to first devise an asset tagging mechanism which would be read similarly by all the parties involved. So just to give you an understanding, this is the scale of the project, the width and breadth of the project. So it was split into, if you can see here, 1 2 3 4 5 on this side, 5 on that side, 5 at the ground level, 5 at the substructure level, and 5 at the superstructure level. So totally the building was split into 20 pieces. Okay, so the whole elevation could be split into 20 pieces. That's how the building was first split to create manageable pieces of asset. Then what we did was set the objective for the facade project. So tagging of every granite tile on the facade was the main intention first, so that we can track which tile is ready and which tile can be shipped to the site, and what is the information regarding each tile. So we had total of 1,84,000 tiles which were supposed to be tagged. So you can understand the amount of effort that had to go into it, and we didn't have that much time because the building was already built to that stage. The Chinese contractor was already having a month's delivery timeline. So once we placed the order, he would take 1 month to cut and ship, right? The target was to have zero wastage. That was the target we set for ourselves when we started the project. Then we were to enable this process by making use of BIM application and unique coding or automated tile tagging system. I will just show how we did that, and generate quantities based on this tagging which we do, so that accuracy is maintained. So the first exercise that we did was, we looked at how we can break down the building into, or each tile so that the duplication of counting or numbering doesn't happen. So this is what we arrived at. What we did was we did a series of tile coding system. So the first one here talks of the facade, whether it's the north facade, south facade, east or west facade. So S, N, W, E. Based on that, you can go to that side of the building. Then the second part where you see A here, are you able to read that A? You have A and L written there. So A here means the zone of the building, A or L. The next here tile color, whether it's the light color or the dark color. So we had mentioned in the beginning that there are two colors of granite, beige and sandstone. So you could mention that in the next series here. Then we have the tile number. So tile type number. So this 001, you could go up to 945. We had this different sizes of tiles, 945 different sizes of tiles which we could place in the project. So first we had to do an analysis of that if we have less than 1000 types of tiles. Once we were sure of that, we assured that we can keep this to 3-digit numbers. Then the next aspect we looked at was the tile count, right? So the last one which you see is which number of tile is that. So if you have a tile of say 600 by 400 size, which is type 20, okay, so here we would write 020, and whichever tile of that size comes, we would start numbering them in chronological order. So 020, 001, 020, 002, 020, 003. It would tell you that it is of that size, and this is the third tile or fourth tile or fifth tile. Now why this last number was important was for us to get a count of each type of tile, because that is what the Chinese vendor had to cut, right, at this at his factory. So finally what we arrived at, you see here we could number each and every tile in the project based on the part that we were dealing with. See, each and every part of the building was tiled and numbered. Each and every door, window, the junction for the door and window was also numbered. Here we have certain types of assemblies, so those were also numbered using a different system. It's the same nomenclature system, but we would say what type of assembly is that, and we would tag each type of assembly. So what does an assembly mean? It is not a single stone piece, but it needs to be created as, you see this, it needs to be created as one piece, this whole thing, so that it can slide and frame into wherever it is being designed for. So this won't be created as one piece of tile there, one piece of tile there. You will not be able to do that sticking and gluing at site. It will become too much to manage. So we designed this assemblies as well. When you see the report that gets generated, it tells you, so this is where you can understand what I was talking of there. So this is for south facade, part M of the building. L is light tile. Then you have series, it's a 604 type of tile size, and this is the fourth tile of that number, right? So if it's a cut tile or a full tile, that would get mentioned here. So this way we would ensure that absolutely no wastage happens and exactly the number of tiles required at the project are delivered. So that brings to the statement of why I think big data and AI is very important in the construction industry, because it helps you keep not just the cost of construction, but also the economical and environmental impact that the project would have. Right? It is not just about using materials to build, it's also to ensure that you don't waste the materials. That's a simpler and easier way to build sensibly. So those were the two projects related to this, and thank you for your time.